The world today continues to be one great mission field, even in countries that have a long history of Christian traditions. The late Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, once said, "It is not enough for us to discover Christ. We must also bring him to others."
Today, Tatiana will share with us her trials and her struggles as she journeyed alone from her native Croatia and made her home in America. She tells us in her message to this conference, "The first time I went on a trip by myself, a dear friend told me, just follow the signs, make sure you don't speed by them, and they will lead you safely to your destination." Tatiana says, "I remember those words when I find myself taking a detour on life's journey." The title of her presentation this afternoon is "Allow Mary to Prepare Us for the New Day." Comes from our Blessed Mother's message from Medjugorje. Open your hearts so that Jesus can enter into them. Please welcome me. Give a warm welcome to Tatiana.
7 years ago, one of my favorite Franciscan priests, actually the favorite Franciscan priest, Father Svet, brought me along to the beautiful conference here in Irvine, California. I remember at that time, I was a baby in my spiritual journey at the very beginning. I was just like my little 1-year-old son, who I know loves me, but doesn't know how to tell me yet. I was just like a little baby who doesn't know how to please her father. I was just like my little boy who makes mistakes, for he doesn't know any better. I was a girl who wanted to please God so much with all of my heart and all of my soul, and I still knew very little. But traveling with Father Svet offered a beautiful opportunity to learn so much about the Almighty Father, to come ever closer to him. And oh, I wish I had more time. I would tell you some funny stories about Father Svet. Some other time. Then I could not imagine or dream what would have happened 7 years after, that I would be here again, speaking to you and singing with the same love and the same desire in my heart to only please the Blessed Mother, the Father, and Jesus. On one late flight with Father Svet, returning back to New York, he asked me, "What are your plans?" And as I proceeded to tell him what I wished and dreamed for my future, he said, "Don't waste your time." I said, "Father, thank you for the confidence." And he said, "No, I don't mean that. I don't mean like you can't achieve what you planned. But you know what? God doesn't work that way. Just let go and let him plan for you. For what he has planned for you is far better and more beautiful than what you can ever dreamed in your wildest dreams." And oh, Father Svet, when I was struggling during those hard years of struggles, I was like, "Oh, well, thank you, Father Svet." But now I see that nothing better can happen in one's life. But when you let God plan, you find yourself in a place where you never thought you'd be. Well, I never thought that so much joy would be to have a family, a husband, the most perfect husband, a little son, and to be able to go around the world and tell the people what we believe, to try to make a difference using the gifts that our Father gave us. In our instance, it's the gift of music and film. Father Svet encouraged me also to go and share my experiences with people. He told me people like to hear other people's experiences. That's how they grow too. And so, encouraged little by little, finally, when I met my husband, I now share my story full time, thus being the only thing that we do. And we also go around the country and share the story and try to change the world, talk to young people about chastity, and use my very experience. Well, it would be impossible for me to tell you in 10 minutes the story that I share, with all the music that I do usually. But my story is a little different than most of the stories that you would hear on the way to Medjugorje. My story is of Croatia that was ruled by communists. You see, when you go to Medjugorje, you see people that never failed, whose faith was stronger than any government. My parents were weak in their faith. My parents were high school kids when I happened to them. My parents were poor people who weren't communists themselves, whose families were interrogated and tormented. And so my parents were one of those who eventually gave up, whose brains were washed so much that after years they forgot what was right and what was wrong. I remember as a little baby, when my sister was a little baby, I was 5 years old. My mom woke us up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drove us out of the city into this apartment building and up on the 5th floor and into this apartment that was all dark. The blinds were tightly shut, and only in the middle there was a table and one candle lit. There was a strange man standing right there, all dressed in black, and I was greatly afraid of that man, especially when he took my little sister into his hands and then mumbled some words that I couldn't understand and called her by a different name and poured some water over her. I turned to my mother in puzzlement, asking for an explanation. But the only thing she could say to me is, "I will tell you one day when the right time comes. But until then, you have to promise me that you will keep this as a secret." You see, both me and my sister were baptized secretly under different names so that communists wouldn't get in track of us and persecute my family. We couldn't go to church. We couldn't profess our faith. We didn't even know that we had faith. Growing up, I was taught in school that there was no God, that God does not exist. As a teenager, I felt the first consequences of living in a world where God does not exist. In communism, in communistic country that I knew, they knew how to rule over men. People that I knew were encouraged to be promiscuous. And for us teenagers, that also meant that we didn't know that there was such thing as chastity. I grew up in a communist country that was different than what you would see in Medjugorje. We heard about Medjugorje the first time in '87. Up till then, I remember watching the news when the newscasters were telling us how there's this tons of people from America coming to see Dubrovnik. That's it. They were telling us that you guys were all just tourists to come to see our coast. And we did not know what was happening there. We were so isolated. In my teenage years, I made many, many mistakes because I didn't know that there was God, because I didn't have the 10 Commandments. And being in school and wanted to learn everything that the teachers, wanted to be a good student, I had to learn what my teachers were telling us. And so eventually, I bought their lies. Eventually, I started to believe that life was nothing else but a bunch of cells, biology and chemistry. I too started to believe that if we can't touch it, or feel it, or prove it by scientific experiment, it does not exist. I too was one of those that started to believe that people that had faith, that people that believed in something else than this world, were uneducated, did not know better. I also tell a story about my people who love music. You see, in poor society, when you don't have anything else, you sing. I remember my family, we would get one pork chop for dinner, and my dad would get the pork chop, and the rest of us would dip the bread into the drippings. talking about low-fat diet. You know, my friends, whenever they start talking about that stuff, I tell them, you know what, forget about the whole thing. You know, I grew up eating bacon fat. And I'm pretty okay, right? But anyway, it was, you know, we were poor, and so the only thing we had was music. If we were hungry or hurting or afraid, we would just sing. And it always seemed to me that music had such magic. And when I asked my dad how come music was so magical, he told me that it was because it was a very special gift. But he could never tell me where the gift had come from. Oh, I sang all the time. When I was 4 years old, I saw a movie, a musical movie where everybody was singing and dancing. And from that moment on, I decided that I wanted to live in that world where everybody would sing and dance all the time. I even felt in my little heart that someplace out there was like an old grandpa sitting in a chair of clouds and watching all of us in a movie. And I got to play the lead. And so I would sing for him. In my heart, I believed that he could hear me if I sang. But growing up and learning all that the communist teachers were teaching us, I too gave up my dreams. And my music too became different, was losing its magic. When I was 19 years old, I became my country's biggest pop star. You see, I won a competition that was a very prestigious one. And everybody, in a matter of days, knew who I was, knew my name, knew everything about me. Oh, I loved being up there on that stage, illuminated by hundreds of spotlights, and in front of me having tens and hundreds of thousands of screaming fans, all calling my name and screaming the sounds of, and the words of my songs. Oh, up there I was special, and I was creating music that had magic, for everybody felt good. But when the lights came down, I would find myself lonely again. I still didn't have answers of how to be happy. It seemed to me that even though everybody was telling me how successful I was and how great I was doing, especially with boys, if you know what I mean, I still couldn't understand what was wrong. I was on the top of the world, and it seemed to the world that I had everything. And there was many, many nights when I was sitting in my room all alone, feeling as if I had nothing. Just before the war in Croatia broke out, I got to perform for the biggest crowd of all. And when I looked out there, all of a sudden I realized that I was made into a hero of a whole generation. My music was so powerful. The television, the films that I was doing, everything had so much influence on those people. And how did I feel? What can I give them as a hero? How can I give them answers? I didn't know anything. I felt as lonely and as abused. I couldn't keep a friend. The most faithful men in those days seemed to be Mr. Jack Daniels. You know, it's scary. You want to know a scary thing? When I talk to teenagers, they get a kick out of it. And I'm like, how do you guys know about Jack Daniels, huh? I thought and I felt like I had nothing. And in that moment, as I was standing there, I remembered their letters that said how much they wanted to be like me. And I thought of those little girls and didn't wish them what I had. I thought, how could I tell them not to do what I do? How can I tell them? For I didn't know. And then I felt terrible weakness in my knees. And I stepped off the stage and I uttered a cry. God, wherever you are, whoever you are, please take me and teach me. I needed to know that there was more. For if there was nothing more, why would I live? I needed to know that there was more because I was on the top of the world. I conquered everything this world had to offer. I tried to even kill myself because why live? Thank God I didn't. Now I know, there was a little angel working overtime, putting my foot, get up from the accelerator because I was, going to crash. I love those angels, don't you? All alone and lost. I only had one friend, a high school friend, who heard my cry, and one Friday evening invited me to come to meet some of her friends. And as we pulled next to the church, I looked at her and I thanked her and said that I couldn't go in there. You see, I was taught that the churches were just these beautiful architectural monuments, nothing else. I would go to churches to admire the art, but I, like many of my kind, did not go there to look for God. Yes, there were those people that prayed there, and those people often looked down upon people like me. Once I attempted to go and see what was there, and I overheard some little old lady saying, "Madonna of Yugoslavia," although I promised I never wore the cones. So I guess she did kind of have the point there, but I still thought, even if I wanted to be a part of it, how could I? I was on the outside looking in, a lost girl, a girl that loved to sing and loved to wear makeup and beautiful clothes and loved to be fun and happy, and I didn't think there was a room in the church for people like me. My friend encouraged me to go. She said, "We're only going to the basement," so I thought, all right, maybe I can handle the basement, it's low enough. And I walked in, and I found just a few people there, my age. They welcomed me. For the first time, I felt they didn't care that I was a star. They wanted to know me as a person. For the first time, I didn't feel threatened without my bodyguards that I always had to have beside my side. For the first time, I felt there was somebody that had the very thing that I needed. And if you looked from the outside, there we were, a girl that had everything, a girl that the world thought was rich, wealthy, had everything. And these couple of people that were poor in ragged clothes, and the world would think that they're losers, and yet they possess the very treasure that we all desire. I couldn't understand the big words at the first. I couldn't understand anything about the church or theology or anything, or why was that man on the cross if he was God? And then slowly they showed me films that spoke to my heart. They taught me about virtues. They gave me music that would heal my soul. They gave me books about ordinary sinners like me who became extraordinary saints. Little by little, I learned about God. And for the longest time, I could not bring myself in front of Jesus, knowing that he died for my sin. Once I realized that all the loneliness and emptiness and all the bad feelings I was feeling was nothing else but the consequence of my sin. I couldn't bring myself there. I couldn't ask him for forgiveness. I thought I was too dirty and too undeserving. And then there was she, the Blessed Mother. You see, as a teenager, when you do something bad, like you break a curfew and you come home and you know your dad's going to be really angry, right? So next morning you sit with your mom, of course, and say, Mama, can you please talk to Dad, in front of me, instead of me, and I kind of I'll hide behind your skirt, while you talk to him, please, please. And so I thought, maybe she will do that for me. And I turned to the Blessed Mother, and I held the rosary in my hand that somebody had given me. And I felt as if she was holding I was holding her own hand. I begged her, I prayed to her that she would convince her son Jesus to love me. I didn't need that much convincing, but it comforted my soul to know that I had a mother behind whose skirt I could hide, who would comfort me, console me, tell me that everything was going to be all right. I would sit there in my bed at night. I wished so much to be like her, to learn how to love God, how to surrender. I would bring myself down and calm so much that in my heart of hearts I could hear her sing me a lullaby and put me at peace. Oh, it was the most beautiful time of my life. And on my 21st birthday, I was given the best present that I could ever imagine. I was asked to sing a little song on the top of a hill in a little chapel, and the chapel could only hold maybe 30 people. Oh, I was so scared. I told my friend who asked me to do that I couldn't. I didn't think I could find strength to utter a note, let alone sing a whole song. But this time, I was not going to sing for people, but I would sing for God. As I heard him calling my name, his lips whispered my name. I was ready to follow him wherever he would lead me. For I found now he was the very giver of my gift. He heard my songs all along, even though I didn't even believe that he was there. How could I have said no to the one who gave me the best birthday present, the gift of faith, the gift of new life? I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, maker of all that's seen and all unseen. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, my Lord. He came down for me, suffered and died for my sin. He rose again, he ascended to heaven and sits at the right hand of the Father. He will come again, in glory he'll reign, and his kingdom will have no end. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who with the Father and the Son is worshipped and glorified. I believe in his forgiveness, I believe in his love. I look for resurrection and the life of the world to come. Amen. I believe, I do believe. last year, as I was traveling with my husband to try to raise the money for our film, and we were someplace in Ohio, and Father Svet called. And I told him what we were doing, and he said, I have 2 words for you: be brave. Well, I wish to tell you what we're trying to do and how to reach out to those out and lonely, lost and lonely that were out there. Maybe some other time. But before I close, I'd like to share one more thing. Father Svet and I traveled around the country for about 2 months. And right after we left the conference and we went to someplace, a couple of concerts afterwards, he looked at me one day and he said, you know, Tatiana, we came here to the United States of America, the greatest country in the world, to pray for peace in our poor Croatia and Bosnia. And I think we made a mistake, he said. I think we're meant to be here to pray for peace in America. Today, as I stand here, I shiver to think how prophetic Father Svet's words were. And so before I go, I'd like you to say this prayer with me. Look on us and console us. Lay your hands now upon us. Intercede for us to your Son. Queen of Peace, pray for us. Svome Sinu preporuči, Majko mira moli za